Two grown men ran through the dark woods that night. Their childhood paradise turned suddenly wrong. Behind them, flashlights shook in the hands of figures streaming from an abandoned church that should have been empty. The singing had stopped. Now there was only the sound of footsteps, and the men didn't look back again until they reached the road. What they'd seen inside that building, what those voices had been chanting in a language neither recognized, would keep them from ever walking those tracks again. Some people live entire lifetimes in the span of a dream, only to wake and find none of it was real. I was a college student, last semester, walking across campus when a football player decided I was in his way. He was 325 pounds. I was 120. I don't remember the hit, just waking up somewhere else entirely. I met her at a coffee shop. Dark hair, shy smile, the kind of person who made my heart skip before she even said hello. It took me months to work up the courage. She had a boyfriend, then another. I waited. I stayed close. Eventually, she saw me the way I'd always seen her. 2 years later, we were married. The ceremony was small, just family, but it felt like the whole world was there. A year after that, our daughter was born. I held her in the hospital and couldn't believe something so small could redefine everything. I got a good job. My wife stayed home. We were happy in a way I didn't know was possible. When our daughter turned 2, my wife told me she was pregnant again. Our son arrived that winter. He had her eyes. Every morning before work, I'd stand in his doorway and watch him sleep, just to make sure he was real. One evening, I was sitting on the couch and I noticed the lamp. It was a square base, red with gold trim, 4 legs, white shade. Nothing special, except the perspective was wrong. Inverted, but still 3-dimensional. I stared at it, trying to understand what I was seeing. I couldn't look away. I stayed up all night. My wife asked if I was okay. I didn't answer. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I sat on that couch and stared at the lamp. Hours became a day became 2. I stopped eating. I stopped drinking. My wife brought someone to talk to me, but I couldn't hear them. She took the kids to her mother's house. I barely noticed. On the 3rd day, it clicked. The lamp wasn't real. The house wasn't real. My wife, my children, none of it was real. 10 years of my life, gone. A fabrication. The lamp began to grow. It filled my vision. All red, the dimensions still wrong, still inverted. I heard voices, screaming, noise I couldn't place, then pain. So much pain I couldn't think. My first words were, "I'm missing teeth." I opened my eyes. I was on my back on a sidewalk. People I didn't know surrounded me, some of them shouting. I had no idea where I was. A cop grabbed me, dragged me across the grass, threw me face down in the back of his car. I was too confused to resist. He drove me to the hospital. No ambulance, just him. I got CT scans. They checked for fractures, brain bleeds, the usual. Physically, I'd heal. Mentally, I was gone. I spent 3 years in a depression I can't fully describe. I was grieving my wife, my children, people who had never existed. I'd come home and expect to see them. I'd wake up crying, hoping I'd dream of her just once. I never did. Sometimes I see my son, just for a second, in my peripheral vision. He's always 5 years old. I can never hear what he's trying to say. Not all whistleblowers come forward to tell you what you want to hear. Some come to tell you what you're not ready for. You can call me Rhea. I spent 8 years in the military, then another decade in a part of U.S. intelligence that doesn't officially exist. My specialty was electro-optics, lasers, sensors, directed energy, the math behind detecting things at a distance. Most of my career was counterterrorism, sanctions evasion, foreign missile tests. Then I got detailed to a small interagency group looking at anomalous aerospace and undersea systems. Things that showed up on sensors, didn't match known platforms, didn't behave like clutter, and didn't go away when you change modes. You're taught to treat anything unexplained as a glitch. Calibration error, operator mistake, software artifact, anything that keeps the world tidy. But after a while, you notice some glitches keep appearing. Different systems, different countries, decades apart. Same behaviors, same locations, same signature that never fits. Eventually, someone pulls you into a skiff, takes your phone, has you sign your life away again, and shows you the next layer. That's where I learned about the Council. Not a single species, a collective of advanced interstellar, maybe interdimensional, civilizations running long-term surveys of stars and planets. Huge distributed sensor arrays watching thousands of systems at once for millions of years at a time. About 2 billion years ago, their instruments picked up biosignatures here. Chemical fingerprints in Earth's atmosphere. Free oxygen, methane, signs of metabolism. We went into a database as interesting. Revisit later. When a world looks promising, they send automated probes. Small, tough, very smart machines. Those probes target the oceans and set up self-replicating facilities on the seafloor. The facilities use local materials to build more probes, craft that operate underwater, in air and near space, and eventually biomechanical avatars that can interact with whatever evolves. The ocean is stable, doesn't care about ice ages, wars, climate swings. Temperatures and pressures change slowly. For most of human history, it's been inaccessible. A lot of the transmedium objects you've heard about are just their hardware doing maintenance, observation, sampling. Nothing heroic. The warp bubble effect was mastered before our solar system existed. It's old tech for them. We're not special. There are about 1 billion Earth-like planets in our galaxy. Some have microbes. Some have complex life. A smaller subset have or had civilizations. We're just one more entry in a very large survey. Once early humans started doing interesting things, we moved from planet with life to planet with potential. They've watched this story unfold around 1,000 times. Chemistry to biology, biology to technology, tool use, language, agriculture, cities, industry, energy, space travel. Somewhere in there, you hit a fork. Either the species figures out how not to blow itself apart with the energy it's accessing, or it wipes itself out. Our situation worried them. We're good at cooperation and extremely good at organized violence. That combination stood out. Once you get to nuclear power, that combo tends to end badly. About 10,000 years ago, there was a major argument inside the Council. One side said we'd self-destruct. The other said we were worth understanding. The compromise was an experiment. Roughly 65,000 humans were removed from Earth and relocated to a preserve on a planet around the star, 82 Eridani. We called them Arids. Their world has dispenser systems that produce whatever they need. Food, clothing, tools, buildings. Think replicators wired into the environment. Nobody starves, nobody is homeless, nobody spends their life chasing money. The point was to remove material scarcity and see what humans do when they're not fighting over resources. The rest of us stayed here on the control planet, dealing with scarcity, ownership, money, hoarding, all the things that define Earth's civilization. The result is that the Arids are now around 5,000 years ahead of us technologically. Same species, same biology, completely different trajectory because of conditions. For most of their history, they thought they were native. They only learned the truth roughly a century ago in our time. Once they knew, some started coming back. The aliens that look almost exactly human are human. They're Arids, born around another star, given a 10,000-year head start. They've met with leaders of certain countries and at least 2 UN Secretary Generals, both deceased. Now, why this has been buried for 80 years? Think like a senior US official in the 1940s and 50s. World War II just ended, the Cold War is starting, everything is capitalism versus communism. Then someone briefs you that there's a group of humans on another world with no money, no private ownership, automatic systems meeting their needs, And in that environment, they advanced thousands of years faster than us. To the men who built the legacy program, that sounded like proof that communism works better than the system they were defending. That terrified them more than aliens did. The core of the cover-up has never just been aliens or their technology, it's the systemic implications. The idea that scarcity and ownership aren't hard-coded into reality, that they're one possible way to run a society, maybe not the optimal one, that was seen as an existential political threat. Now add the crash retrieval incidents. Roswell 47, Kecksburg 65, others around the world. Most weren't accidents, they were tests and gifts. The council, with Arity input, allowed certain craft to fall into human hands in a controlled way. Enough intact technology that a motivated society could learn from it, not enough to instantly rewrite everything. Kecksburg wasn't called a crash internally. It was a landing, a direct result of a meeting and gift agreement made at Holloman AFB the year prior. The idea was to see who did what with it, who figured it out, who kept it secret, who tried to share, who tried to weaponize it. Based on those results, the plan was to pick one primary human partner to act as the main interface for full council contact and begin a managed process of reunifying Earth humans with the Arids. You can argue whether that's fair, but that's what happened. Sometimes the most unsettling encounters happen in the most mundane places, and sometimes you're not the only one who sees it. I had one of the best days of my life. Things had really turned around for me, and I was in a great mood. I decided to stop at Goodwill. I love thrift shopping. I was in the housewares aisle when I felt someone watching me. I turned around. The store was crowded, but only one other person was in my aisle. She looked between 18 and 25. Very pale, dark hair, dressed all in black. She wasn't holding anything. No purse, no basket, nothing in her hands. She wasn't looking at the shelves. She was looking at Mateo. Her eyes were incredibly dark. I was immediately uncomfortable. My first thought was, what is she doing here? She doesn't belong here. Then every cell in my body told me to move. I walked away fast, pushing my cart, trying not to look back. I turned my head. She was beside me, just across the aisle. I don't know how she got there. It was like she'd teleported. I'd only looked away for a second. I decided to leave. As I was heading to the exit, my niece and her family walked in. I spoke to them briefly, then left. I tried not to think about the woman. I went about the rest of my day like normal. About an hour ago, my cell phone rang. It was my niece's husband, but the call wouldn't connect. I live in the woods, so that's not unusual. I tried calling him on my home phone. That wouldn't connect either, and that is unusual. Then I got a text from him. It said, "Hey, really odd, I know, but do you remember a young woman dressed in black emo style at the Goodwill today? Maybe 18, 25? I had chills all over. I was instantly, viscerally terrified. I knew he'd seen her too. I tried calling again. This time it went through. He'd had the same exact experience. The soulless stare, the teleporting, the dread, the need to get away. He's a grown man with a full-time job and a family. He wouldn't normally be afraid of a random woman at Goodwill. My niece never saw her. She thought her husband was crazy until I confirmed the story. I don't know what I saw. I don't know why my niece's husband saw it too, but she didn't. I don't know why it frightened us both so badly. I shut all my curtains and blinds. I locked all my doors. I lit candles and asked for protection. I've been shaking. I'm 50 years old and I'm scared. I ended up lighting white candles, salting my windowsill, saying a prayer and going to sleep. I still have no idea what happened, but I'm going back to not thinking about it. It didn't come home with me. That's enough. Nostalgia and beer convinced two childhood friends to relive an old adventure, but the woods they thought they knew had changed. I grew up in Ohio in the 70s. My friend Joe lived on a farm that bordered a big forest. My parents would drop me off in the morning, and we'd stay in the woods all weekend, only coming out for school. We loved pretending we were frontiersmen, building shelters, traps, practicing fire with sticks, the whole thing. In high school, we got the idea to pull a Stand By Me. We'd walk railroad tracks out in the country, find cool bridge to fish from, camp near the tracks. We knew it was dangerous and we were probably right trespassing, but we were kids. We had a lot of fun. We did it multiple times. Nothing bad ever happened. After high school, we went our own ways but stayed in touch. One summer in the mid-90s, we were both in town for about a week. One night, sitting around a fire, we got talking about our old Stand By Me trips. Nostalgia and beer are a hell of a mix. We decided to take a day, walk the rails, camp one night, walk home. My wife dropped us off in our old spot outside our hometown. She thought it was crazy. When she pulled away, Joe suggested we take the opposite direction, just to be adventurous. We knew the land, we had a map. I said, what the hell? The day went fine. We found a bridge, sat on the edge, smoked a joint, moved on. Before night set in, we picked a spot to camp. Thick forest, trees on every side of the tracks, like a tunnel. We'd brought hammocks to sleep in, but first we did a little scouting. We used to do this in the old days. Walk the area to make sure we weren't camping in someone's yard. We walked maybe 100 feet into the woods and up a small incline. If we didn't see anything from the top of the hill, we'd be fine. When we got to the top, we saw an old building at the bottom, about 100 yards into the woods. Barely visible. We assumed it was a sugar shack. There didn't appear to be a road. No movement, no lights. We decided to walk closer, just to make sure. It wasn't a sugar shack. It was an old church. It looked abandoned for years. Wooden planks almost black from moss and rot. A cross on top, also weathered black. No glass in the windows. No doors, just open doorways. Inside were rows of pews and a raised section for a preacher. We didn't go all the way in. There was no sign of anyone. No footprints, no paths, no roads. We left immediately, went back up the hill to our campsite. Having a hill between us and the church made us feel better, but we were still uneasy. We chalked it up to natural creepiness. It was dusk, so we rigged up our hammocks and decided to go to sleep and move on at early morning. Night set in. As we lay in our hammocks talking, we began to hear something in the direction of the church. It sounded like people singing. We slid out of our hammocks and hunkered down, straining to hear. The singing continued but didn't get louder. We decided to creep back up the hill. The moon was barely out, just enough light to see. We didn't use flashlights. Didn't talk. When we got to the top, we saw light in the distance. It was coming from the church. The singing was coming from inside. The light looked like candlelight flickering. We couldn't make out what was being sung. It sounded like church music, but in another language. We sat and watched, trying to see who was in there, but we only saw occasional shadows. We had about a football field length between us, and we aimed to keep it that way. The singing continued, then stopped. After that, a booming male voice began to chant. It sounded like an Old Testament preacher, but in a language we couldn't understand. Eventually, the single voice would say something and a bunch of voices would answer in song. This lasted for a while. Then they all broke into this long, sustained wail that kept getting louder. I covered my ears, then it stopped. I was about to say, let's get out of here, when Joe hissed, "They're coming out." We were far enough away that we couldn't see them well, but we could see a line of figures walk out the doorway, holding hands in single file. Some had flashlights. They began to sing again. The lights began to move toward us in the hill. We booked it back to camp, grabbed our stuff, ran to the tracks. Once there, we ran down the tracks in the direction we'd come from. After a few minutes, we stopped and looked back. We saw lights coming down the hill, moving erratically, shaking. We continued to run in spurts and walk as fast as we could. We stopped seeing the lights. We came to a road. By our map, a small town was about 15 minutes down it. We walked there, got to a 24-hour gas station, called my wife to come get us. My wife and other friends thought it was kids messing around. But I heard those voices. They didn't sound like kids. Not sure who those people were, but it was the creepiest thing that ever happened to me in the woods. 4 stories. A man who lived a decade in seconds. A whistleblower who says we're part of an experiment, a woman who teleported in a Goodwill aisle, and a church in the woods that should have been empty. Some things don't resolve. They just end. If you enjoyed, subscribe. New compilations every week. And if you've got a story that still keeps